My husband stole our entire future, leaving me with nothing but his most prized possession, a 1967 Shelby GT500. I sold his soul for a single dollar, convinced it was revenge, but that act was just the first piece of his twisted, brilliant game. The smell of lemon polish and old leather still hung in the air. It was Mark's smell, or more accurately, it was the smell of his one true love, the one he lovingly called Eleanor. I used to joke that I was the other woman, the side piece to a 1967 Shelby GT500. He would laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that used to make my heart flutter and pull me close. "Don't be silly," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "You're the one who understands. You get it." I thought I did. I thought his obsession with the car was just a hobby, a passion project. I supported it. I poured my own savings into it when he needed a rare part from overseas. I spent countless weekends handing him wrenches and polishing chrome until my fingers were raw, happy just to be in his orbit. The car was his masterpiece, a gleaming monument of raven black paint and white racing stripes that he'd spent 10 years restoring from a rust bucket into a show-winning legend. It was his pride, his joy, his legacy. I was just his wife. We were supposed to be closing on our dream house next week, a little blue house with a big backyard for the dog we were going to get, and a wraparound porch where we'd grow old together. We'd saved for years, every bonus, every extra paycheck, poured into a joint savings account. The down payment was sitting there, a testament to our shared future, a 6-figure promise of picket fences and happily ever afters. This morning, I woke up humming, ready to call the realtor and confirm the final wire transfer details. Mark had left early, said he had a meeting with a new client across the state, and would be gone for a couple of days. He'd kissed me goodbye while I was still half asleep, a quick, cool peck on the cheek that felt more like a formality than an act of love. I didn't think anything of it. I made my coffee, sat down at my laptop, and pulled up our online banking page. The login screen blinked at me, cheerfully unaware that it was about to detonate my entire world. I typed in the password, took a sip of my coffee, and waited for the numbers to load. And then I saw it. Savings account balance, 7/24. I blinked. I refreshed the page. $7.24. It had to be a glitch, a system error. My heart started to pound a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. I clicked on the transaction history. There, time-stamped at 3:15 a.m., was a single massive wire transfer. The entire balance, every penny we had saved, moved to an account I didn't recognize. The account name was just a string of numbers, anonymous and cold. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called Mark, straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. A third, fourth, fifth time, each unanswered ring was like a hammer blow to my chest. Panic was starting to curdle into a sick, icy dread. I ran to our bedroom. His side of the closet was half empty. His DOP kit was gone from the bathroom. His passport wasn't in the desk drawer where we kept our important documents. And then I saw it. Propped up against my pillow was a plain white envelope. My name was written on the front in his familiar, neat block letters. It wasn't a letter. It was a note. 5 sentences that took a sledgehammer to the foundations of my life. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I've met someone else. The money is for our new start. Don't try to find me. This is for the best. I don't know how long I sat there on the edge of the bed we had shared, clutching that piece of paper. The world had gone silent, a dull roar filling my ears. He hadn't just left me. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had methodically, deliberately, and completely erased me. He had stolen our future, our security, every dream we had ever built together, and left me with $7 and an empty house filled with memories that now felt like lies. The grief came first, a tidal wave that left me gasping for air, choking on sobs that felt like they were tearing me apart from the inside. Then came the anger, a white-hot volcanic rage that burned away the tears. How dare he? After everything I'd given him, everything I'd sacrificed, He thought he could just disappear and leave me with nothing? My gaze drifted from the cruel note in my trembling hand and fell upon the key hook by the door. Hanging there, next to my own car keys, was a single gleaming silver key with the iconic cobra emblem, Eleanor's key. He had left the car. For a second, confusion cut through my rage. Why would he leave the one thing he treasured more than life itself? Then it hit me. The car was in my name. For insurance purposes, he'd said years ago. It was cheaper that way. He probably planned to come back for it with a lawyer, or maybe he thought I was so broken I'd just let him take it. He thought he had planned for every contingency, outsmarted me at every turn. He believed he had taken everything of value from our life together. But as I stood up, my tears drying on my face, a cold, crystalline clarity settled over me. He had made one fatal, catastrophic mistake. He had left behind his soul sitting right there in my garage. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. He had taken my future, so I was going to take his past, his present, and everything he ever hoped to be, and I was going to sell it all for exactly $1. My feet carried me to the garage, the door humming open to reveal the beast in its lair. Eleanor sat under the single fluorescent bulb, her black paint so deep it looked like a pool of liquid night. Every curve, every line was perfect. I knew because my own hands had sanded those panels, my own eyes had scanned for the slightest imperfection. I ran a hand along the cool metal of the fender, the ghost of Mark's cologne and motor oil rising from the polished surface. This car wasn't just metal and paint, it was a time capsule of our marriage. I could see us in its reflection. The young, laughing couple covered in grease, sharing a cheap beer on the garage floor, the triumphant pair holding a first-place trophy at the local car show, the quiet team working in comfortable silence, passing tools back and forth like a well-rehearsed dance. It was all a lie. The whole damn thing was a lie. He wasn't building a future with me. He was just using my time, my money, and my love as resources for his project while he planned his exit. I opened the driver's side door. The scent of rich leather and gasoline filled my lungs. I slid into the bucket seat, my hands gripping the wooden steering wheel. Mark always said driving Eleanor was like shaking hands with history. He loved the raw, untamed power, the roar of the V8 engine that vibrated through your bones. He had promised me a road trip up the coast in it once we'd closed on the house, a celebratory tour. Another lie. He was probably on the road right now with her in some soulless rental car, using our money to build new memories. My fingers traced the ignition. I had the key. I could drive this car straight into a lake and watch it sink. I could take a sledgehammer to that pristine hood. The destructive urge was a physical thing, a fire in my veins, but that would be too easy, too quick. Destruction was an ending. Mark didn't deserve an ending. He deserved to watch his legacy get passed on, to see his one true love in the hands of someone else, knowing he was powerless to stop it. The pain had to be slow, a wound that would never, ever heal. I went back inside, the cold resolve settling deep in my bones. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I didn't go to a car enthusiast site or a collector's forum. That's what he would expect. No, I went somewhere public, somewhere messy, somewhere the story would travel like wildfire, a massive local community Facebook group. I uploaded the most stunning picture I had of Eleanor gleaming under the sun at that car show we'd won. Then I began to write the post. For sale, 1967 Shelby GT 500. Fully restored, numbers-matching 428 Police Interceptor engine. 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears went into making this car a national show winner. It was my husband's pride and joy, the thing he loved more than anything in this world, and I mean anything. He loved it so much that he emptied our joint bank account, stealing the down payment for our house, to run off with another woman. He left me with nothing but this car. The problem is, for insurance purposes, he put the car in my name. His one mistake. So I'm selling his soul. Price, $1. No, that is not a typo. $1 single. But there's a catch. I'm not selling it to the first person who shows up. You can't be a dealer or a flipper. I don't want your bank statements. I want your story. In 200 words or less, email me and tell me why you should be the one to own this car. Tell me what you'd do with it. The person with the best story gets the car, the clean title, and a single dollar bill to hand me in exchange. My husband believed this car was his legacy. I want to make sure it becomes a legend for someone who actually deserves one. The deadline is tomorrow at noon. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. For a minute, there was silence. Then my phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. And again. It didn't stop. The post exploded. Within an hour, it had thousands of shares. My email inbox was a war zone. The stories poured in. Some were just greedy. I deserve it. Pick me. Others were heartbreaking tales of loss and dreams. There were fathers who wanted to connect with their sons, sons who wanted to honor their late fathers. There were veterans with stories that made my own problems feel small. I spent hours reading, my anger slowly being replaced by a strange sense of purpose. I was a gatekeeper, and I was about to change someone's life forever, all while destroying Mark's. The emails were a blur of hope and desperation. It was overwhelming. I was about to close the laptop for the night, my eyes burning from the screen, when a new message popped up at the top of my inbox. The subject line was simple, just 2 words. For my dad. It was different from the others, shorter, more direct. My cursor hovered over it, a strange feeling washing over me. This was it. I just knew it. I clicked it open. The first sentence wasn't a plea or a sob story. It was a statement, a gut punch that made all the air leave my lungs. And as I kept reading, a slow, predatory smile spread across my face. Oh, this was better than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just revenge. This was poetry. The email was from a young woman named Sarah. Her profile picture showed a smiling girl in a cap and gown, standing next to a man in a wheelchair. His smile was broad and genuine, even though his body was frail. Her words were simple, direct, and they cut right through the noise of the hundreds of other emails. My dad is dying. She began. He has ALS and the doctors have given him 6 months, maybe less if we're unlucky. Before he got sick, he was a mechanic, not a fancy one, just a guy in a small town who loved making old things run like new. His dream car was always a '67 Shelby. He had a picture of one pinned to the corkboard in his garage for 30 years. He used to tell me stories about seeing one for the first time at a car show when he was a kid. He'd say, "Sarah, that car isn't just a car, it's freedom. It's the American dream on 4 wheels. He saved his whole life to buy a shell of one, a rust bucket he was going to restore himself in his retirement. But then the diagnosis came, and the retirement fund became a medical fund. The shell of the car is still sitting in his garage, under a tarp. He can't work on it anymore. His hands don't obey his brain like they used to. Most days he just sits in his chair and looks out the window at the garage. If I got your car, I would give him his last wish. I would take him for one ride. One perfect drive down the coast, with the windows down and the engine roaring. I want him to feel that freedom one more time before he goes. I want to see that light in his eyes again. The car would be his. It would sit in his garage, next to his unfinished project, a testament that some dreams, even if you can't build them yourself, can still come true." I read it 3 times. The words shimmered through the tears welling in my eyes. This was it. This was the story. It wasn't just about giving a car to someone who deserved it. It was about fulfilling a dying man's final wish, a dream that Mark's stolen money had made impossible for this family. It was the perfect counter-narrative to Mark's selfish greed. He used our future to start a new life of empty pleasure. I would use his prized possession to grant a final, beautiful memory. The poetry of it was exquisite. The decision was made. I spent the next morning fielding calls from local news reporters and ignoring the hundreds of new emails that had flooded my inbox overnight. My post had become a local phenomenon. At precisely 11:55 a.m., I updated the Facebook post. Thank you, everyone, for your incredible stories. A decision has been made. The new owner will be arriving at my home tomorrow at noon to claim the car. To protect their privacy, I will be deactivating my social media accounts after this post. Thank you for your support. I didn't name Sarah. I didn't want a media circus descending on her and her father. This moment was for them, not for public consumption. The next day felt like an eternity. I cleaned the house, not because it was dirty, but because I needed to keep my hands busy. I kept expecting a call from Mark, a furious, screaming message, but there was nothing, just silence. He was probably sunning himself on a beach somewhere with her, oblivious. The thought fueled me. At noon, a modest, slightly beaten-up sedan pulled into my driveway. A young woman got out, the same one from the profile picture. Sarah. She was nervous, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her purse. I can't believe this is real, she stammered, her eyes wide as she looked at my house. It's real, I said, managing a small smile. I led her to the garage and hit the button. The door rumbled upward, slowly revealing Eleanor in all her glory. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. It's more beautiful than the pictures, she whispered, taking a tentative step forward. She's all yours, I said, holding out the key and the title, which I'd already signed over. I just need one thing from you. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a single, crisp dollar bill. Her hand was shaking as she passed it to me. The transaction felt surreal, monumental. I took the dollar and tucked it into my pocket. It was the most valuable dollar I would ever earn. My dad. He's going to lose his mind, she said, her voice thick with emotion as she ran a reverent hand over the hood. Thank you. I don't have the words. You have no idea what this means. I think I do, I said softly. Just promise me you'll send me a picture of the drive. I will, she promised, her face radiating a joy so pure it almost hurt to look at. We spent another 20 minutes with me showing her the car's quirks, the way the clutch caught just so, the specific sequence to start it on a cold day. As she slid into the driver's seat, I felt a pang, not of regret, but of finality. This was the end of a chapter. She turned the key. The 4i28 engine roared to life, a deep, guttural sound that shook the very foundation of the garage. It was a sound of fury, of power, of a promise being kept. Sarah gave me one last tearful wave, and then she backed Eleanor out of the driveway, the sunlight catching the chrome, and drove away down the street, leaving me in an empty garage. I stood there for a long time, the silence ringing in my ears. The phantom smell of leather and lemon polish was already starting to fade. I felt strangely calm. I had done it. It was over. I turned to go back inside, my mind already turning to the practicalities of my new, shattered life. I needed to call a lawyer. I needed to find a cheaper apartment. As I stepped through the door into my kitchen, my phone, which had been silent for a day, buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number, but the area code was from the other side of the country. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I answered it. What have you done? The voice was ice and fury. It was Mark. He had seen the news. I gave a dying man his last wish, I said, my own voice steady, devoid of the emotion I'd felt just moments before. Something you wouldn't understand. There was a choked sound on the other end, something between a sob and a scream of rage. You think this is over? You think you can just give away my car? It wasn't your car, Mark, I reminded him coolly. It was mine, and I sold it, legally. He was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, I heard another voice in the background, a woman's voice, faint but clear. Just tell her, honey, she was saying. Tell her the rest. Mark took a shaky breath. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It wasn't angry anymore. It was something worse. It was the sound of victory. You stupid, sentimental fool. You actually thought this was about a car? The car was never the prize. It was the bait, and you took it perfectly." The world tilted on its axis. My hand tightened on the phone, the plastic creaking under the pressure. "What are you talking about, Mark? What bait?" His laugh was an ugly, jagged thing that scraped against my ear. "Oh, this is rich. You really have no idea, do you? You've been so wrapped up in your righteous little revenge fantasy, playing Lady Bountiful with my property." "My property," I hissed, the words tasting like acid. "Fine, your property. But you're missing the point as usual. While you were busy becoming a local hero, a viral sensation for your sob story, I was busy making the real moves. You see, that car, my beautiful Eleanor, wasn't just a car. She was an asset, a very, very valuable asset." A cold dread began to seep into my bones, far colder than the shock of his betrayal. "It's a classic car, Mark. I know it's valuable." "Valuable?" He laughed again. "Sweetheart, you have no idea. Do you remember about 5 years ago when we had it officially appraised for that collector's insurance policy? The one I handled all the paperwork for?" I vaguely remembered. Mark had taken care of everything, just like he always did with the car. He had presented me with a folder of official-looking documents, and I, the trusting, supportive wife, had signed on the dotted line without reading the fine print. It was appraised for $150,000, for insurance purposes. "Exactly," he crowed, and I could hear the triumphant smirk in his voice. $150,000. That was the official, legally documented value of the asset, an asset that was, as you so helpfully pointed out to the entire internet, solely in your name. The pieces started clicking into place, each one a shard of ice in my gut. "What did you do, Mark?" "It's not what I did, honey. It's what we did. Or rather, what you just did. When I took the money from our savings, I knew you'd be angry. I knew you'd come after the car. It was the only thing you could touch. I counted on your sentimental, dramatic nature. I knew you wouldn't just sell it for market value. That would be too simple for you. You had to make a statement. You had to turn it into a grand gesture of defiance." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, twisting the knife. "And you did. You sold a legally appraised asset worth $150,000 for a single dollar. You have a bill of sale, I assume? A public record on social media seen by thousands of people? You announced to the world in a fit of pique that you were willingly and knowingly disposing of a major marital asset for virtually nothing." My breath hitched. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my legs suddenly weak. What does that matter? It was mine to sell. "Ordinarily, yes," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But we live in a community property state. And when one spouse is found to have maliciously and intentionally squandered a significant marital asset right before a divorce filing, well, the judges here don't take kindly to that. They have a term for it: dissipation of assets. And they have a very specific way of rectifying it. The room was spinning. I couldn't breathe. Rectifying it, how? It's simple, really. In the divorce settlement, the court will assign the full value of the squandered asset to the person who squandered it. So that $150,000? In the eyes of the court, you didn't give it away. You paid it to yourself. It's part of your half of the marital estate. The cash I took? That's my half. We're square. The phone slipped from my grasp and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed in the cavernous silence of the empty house. I could still hear his tinny voice squawking from the receiver, but the words were a meaningless buzz. He had played me. He had played me so completely, so masterfully, that I had authored my own destruction. My act of righteous revenge had been the final crucial move in his game. I hadn't sold his soul. I had handed him our entire net worth on a silver platter, gift-wrapped in a feel-good story for the 6 o'clock news. He hadn't left Eleanor by accident. He hadn't made a mistake. He had left it as a trap, A perfectly crafted, psychologically brilliant trap designed for an audience of one. Me. He knew my heart, knew my pride, knew my anger, and he had weaponized it all against me. The money, the house, the car, it was all gone. And in its place was a debt. A phantom debt of $150,000 that the law would say I already possessed. He had left me with less than nothing. He had left me in a hole so deep I couldn't see the light. I sank to the floor, my back sliding down the kitchen cabinets. The single-dollar bill was still in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was crisp and new, a trophy from my own execution. Mark had not only won, he had made me load the gun, aim it at my own head, and pull the trigger. He had made me thank him for the bullet. My mind raced, desperately trying to find a way out, an angle I had missed. The title was in my name. The sale was legal. The email from Sarah? The Facebook post? My God, the digital paper trail I had created was a prosecutor's dream. It was a signed confession. I had meticulously documented my own financial ruin. As I sat there, numb and hollow, my phone buzzed again on the floor beside me. It wasn't Mark. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. My hands shaking, I picked it up and read the words on the screen. "Thank you again for the car. My dad and I just took her for a spin down the coast. He hasn't smiled like this in years. You're an angel. Sarah." Attached was a photo. In it, an elderly man, frail but beaming, sat in the passenger seat of Eleanor. The setting sun glinted off the black paint, the ocean a brilliant blue in the background. His eyes were bright, filled with a pure, unadulterated joy. He looked free, and sitting there in the driver's seat with her arm around her father, smiling at the camera, was the woman whose voice I had just heard in the background of Mark's phone call. It wasn't Sarah. It was Mark's new girlfriend. The photograph burned itself onto my retinas. Every detail, every pixel, became a new instrument of torture. The woman in the driver's seat, the one I had believed to be the selfless daughter, Sarah, was a stranger, but her face was triumphant. She was pretty, younger than me, with a smug, self-satisfied smile that made my stomach churn with a fresh wave of nausea. The man in the passenger seat wasn't frail with ALS. He was tanned, healthy, and laughing, his arm thrown across the back of the seat. He was probably her father, sure, but he wasn't a dying man. He was an actor in their sickening little play. The story, the email, the dying wish it was all a lie. A meticulously crafted, emotionally manipulative lie designed to hook the biggest fish of all, me. I zoomed in on the photo, my thumb shaking against the screen. The woman. I replayed Mark's phone call in my head, her voice in the background, faint but clear. "Just tell her, honey. Tell her the rest." It was the same woman, the same cadence, the same smugness. They had been together, listening on speakerphone, enjoying every second of my demise. They had probably drafted that email together, poring over every word to make it as heart-wrenching and irresistible as possible. They knew I wouldn't be able to resist a story that noble, that tragic. It was the perfect bait for the sentimental fool Mark knew me to be. The air in my lungs turned to poison. I was suffocating. This wasn't just a divorce or a financial betrayal. This was a conspiracy. They hadn't just outsmarted me. They had psychologically dissected me, cataloged my weaknesses, my empathy, my desire for justice, my theatrical flair for revenge, and used them to build the perfect trap. They had made me an accomplice in their heist. I didn't just hand them the car, I delivered it on a silver platter with a bow on top. Convinced I was a hero. The public praise, the glowing news articles that were probably already being written, the feeling of empowerment I had cherished for the last 24 hours, it all curdled into the bitterest humiliation I had ever tasted. I scrambled to my laptop, my movements clumsy and frantic. I pulled up the community Facebook group. My post was still there, pinned at the top, a monument to my own stupidity. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments praising my strength and generosity. "What a queen," one read. "He'll regret this forever," said another. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. He wasn't regretting anything. He was celebrating. I went to the profile of Sarah, the one who had sent the email. The account was gone. It had never been real. Just a shell created for the sole purpose of duping me. The email address she'd used? I typed it into a search engine. No results. It was a ghost. My mind was a maelstrom of shame and fury. How could I have been so blind? I had been so focused on the pain of Mark's betrayal that I never once stopped to consider the possibility of a deeper deception. I had wanted a clean, symbolic victory, a storybook ending where the villain gets his just desserts and a deserving soul gets a miracle. Life isn't a storybook. It's a knife fight in a dark alley, and I had just shown up with a bouquet of flowers. I had to do something. I couldn't let them win. Not like this. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? I willingly sold my car for $1 and now I regret it? They would laugh me out of the station. I thought about calling a lawyer, and I knew I still had to. But the legal reality was grim. Mark was right. I had a mountain of self-inflicted evidence against me. He had the appraisal. I had the bill of sale. Case closed. Defeated, I walked back into the garage. The empty space where Eleanor used to sit felt like a fresh wound. The oil stain on the concrete floor was like a ghost. My eyes scanned the shelves, the greasy toolboxes, the stacks of old car magazines, 10 years of my life, all dedicated to a lie. And then I saw it. Tucked away on a high shelf, behind a stack of old owner's manuals, was a dusty, forgotten shoebox. It was labeled in Mark's handwriting, Eleanor Original Parts. My heart gave a faint flicker. Throughout the restoration, Mark had been a purist. Whenever he replaced a part with a higher performance modern equivalent, he meticulously cleaned and saved the original. The original radio, the original carburetor, the original distributor cap. He called them the car's birth certificate. Too sentimental to throw away, but not valuable enough to keep in the house. He was planning to sell them eventually to other restorers, but he never got around to it. To him, they were just valuable old junk. But to a collector trying to prove a car's provenance, they were everything. They were the car's DNA. My fingers trembled as I pulled the box down, blowing a decade of dust off the lid. I opened it. Inside, nestled in old rags, were the tarnished, greasy pieces of Eleanor's past. They were worthless to a casual observer, but to the right person, they were priceless. And then, at the very bottom of the box, I saw something else. It was a small leather-bound logbook. I didn't recognize it. I opened the cover. The first page read, Project Eleanor Restoration Log. Inside, in Mark's precise, neat handwriting, was a detailed record of the entire 10-year restoration. Every part purchased, every modification made, every serial number. He had documented everything. I flipped through the pages, a strange mix of nostalgia and disgust washing over me. And then I got to the last few entries, dated just a few months ago. My blood ran cold. He had detailed the final engine tune-up, the last polish, and then the final entry, written just a week before he left me. It wasn't about a part or a procedure. It was a single cryptic sentence. A sentence that made no sense at all, but at the same time, it felt like it could be the key to everything. Firewall VIN plate swap complete. The new Eleanor is born. Firewall VIN plate swap complete. The words swam before my eyes. I read the sentence again and again, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of its meaning. VIN. Vehicle identification number. The car's legal identity, its fingerprint. A small metal plate riveted to the firewall in the engine bay. To swap it was illegal. Highly illegal. It was the kind of thing chop shops did to hide stolen vehicles. But why would Mark do it? He owned the car. Or rather, I did. I sank to the greasy floor of the garage, the logbook open in my lap. My mind was racing, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. The rust bucket he'd bought 10 years ago, he'd told me it was a genuine GT500, a rare barn find. He had the title, the paperwork to prove it. We'd spent a fortune, my fortune, restoring it. But what if it wasn't? What if the original car, the one the title and the VIN belonged to, was just a shell, a legal placeholder? My thoughts flew back through the years. I remembered a trip Mark had taken about a year into the project. He'd gone to a salvage auction in another state, he'd said, to look for a specific rear axle. He came back empty-handed and frustrated, or so he claimed. But what if he hadn't? What if he'd found something else? A different wreck? A car that was too damaged to be legally salvaged, but had a solid, rust-free body. A standard '67 Mustang, not a rare Shelby. A car he could buy for scrap metal prices. The plan unfurled in my mind, as horrifying as it was brilliant. Mark had used the legitimate title and VIN from the original rotted-out Shelby. But the car he actually built, the gleaming black masterpiece I had just sold for $1, wasn't that car at all. It was a clone. A very, very good clone, but a clone nonetheless. He had taken a common Mustang body and painstakingly rebuilt it with Shelby parts. Some original, some reproduction. The final touch, the masterstroke of his deceit, was swapping the VIN plate from the original wreck onto the firewall of the clone. He had essentially performed an identity transplant on a car. This changed everything. The official appraisal for $150,000, that was for a numbers-matching, fully documented 1967 Shelby GT500. The car I had just given his girlfriend was not that car. It was a magnificent forgery. Legally, it was a fraud. Worth a lot of money, yes, but not Shelby money. More importantly, its legal status was a nightmare. A car with a swapped VIN is a ghost in the system. It can't be legally registered or insured in most states. It's a beautiful, powerful, six-figure paperweight. The rage that had been a raging inferno, now cooled into something sharp and icy. This wasn't just about dissipation of assets anymore. This was about fraud. Insurance fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. He hadn't just built a car, he'd built a crime. And I had the proof right here in my hands, in his own meticulous handwriting, the logbook, the box of original parts, whose serial numbers would match the original title, but not the parts currently on the car he'd given away. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a local news site. The headline read, "Local woman's viral revenge, sells cheating husband's classic car for $1 to father of dying girl." They had already written the story. My story. The one Mark and his accomplice had fed me. They were painting me as the tragic, heroic figure. They didn't know they were telling the story of the perfect crime. And in that moment, I realized Mark's plan had one fatal flaw. He had wanted the story to go viral. He needed the public record of the sale to solidify his legal position for the divorce. But in making the story so public, he had shined a massive, unblinking spotlight on the car itself. And that car could not stand up to scrutiny. A slow, predatory smile, a real one this time, spread across my face. He thought he had trapped me. He thought he was holding all the cards. But he had left the entire deck of cards, the instructions for the trick, right here in this dusty shoebox. He had underestimated me for the last time. I wasn't a sentimental fool. I was the one person on Earth who knew every inch of that car, who knew the story of its creation, and I was the one person who could burn his entire world to the ground. I stood up, a newfound purpose coursing through my veins. The first call wasn't going to be to a divorce lawyer. It was going to be to someone else entirely, someone Mark had mentioned years ago, a man he respected and feared in equal measure, a man who was the editor of the largest classic car magazine in the country, a purist known for his ruthless takedowns of forgeries and fakes. My second call would be to the state insurance commissioner's office. But first, I had one more message to send. I picked up my phone and opened the photo Sarah had sent me. I cropped it to show just her face smug, triumphant, and completely unaware of the storm that was about to break over her head. I sent the image to Mark. I didn't add any text. I just let the picture speak for itself. A few seconds later, 3 dots appeared. He was typing a reply. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. The message that finally came through wasn't what I expected. It wasn't angry or gloating. It was a single line of text that made the floor drop out from beneath me all over again. I know you have the logbook, but you should have kept reading to the very last page. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. The very last page? I fumbled with the logbook, my hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the stiff, greasy pages. I had stopped reading when I saw the entry about the VIN swap, convinced I had found the final piece of the puzzle, the smoking gun that would win me the war. His message was a cold splash of reality, telling me I hadn't seen the whole picture. I had only seen the battlefield he'd wanted me to see. I flipped past pages of engine specs, wiring diagrams, and notes on paint codes until I reached the end. The final page was different. It wasn't a log entry. It was a photocopy of a document folded neatly and tucked into a plastic sleeve, glued to the inside back cover. I carefully slid it out. My breath caught in my throat. It was a title, a car title. But it wasn't for the Shelby. The VIN was different. The make and model listed were for a 1968 Ford Mustang. The name of the registered owner made my world stop. It was my name. Beneath the title was a second document. It was a receipt from a salvage auction, dated a year into the restoration project, the same time as that trip Mark had taken. The receipt was for the cash purchase of a wrecked 1968 Ford Mustang. The buyer listed was Mark. The VIN on the receipt matched the VIN on the title that was now in my name. I didn't understand. Why would he buy a different wrecked car? And why would he put the title in my name? My eyes scanned back to the logbook, to the final chilling entry. Firewall VIN plate swap complete. The new Eleanor is born. It hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The car he'd built, the beautiful black clone that his girlfriend was now driving, hadn't been built from a standard '67 Mustang body. It had been built using the body and chassis of the wrecked '68 Mustang from the salvage yard, the car for which I, unknowingly, held the legal title. His plan was a labyrinth of pure evil, with layers of deception I couldn't have imagined. He hadn't just created a clone of a Shelby. He had committed a far more sophisticated crime known as VIN cloning or rebirthing. He had taken a legally dead car, the wrecked '68 Mustang, and given it the identity of a legally living one, the '67 Shelby. The shell of the original Shelby, the one whose VIN was now attached to the clone, was probably long gone, cut into pieces and sold for scrap. What was left was an impossible situation. The car that was now registered as a '67 Shelby was in fact a '68 Mustang. And the '68 Mustang, according to the title in my hand, belonged to me. He had tangled the legal identities of these cars into a knot so tight it was impossible to unravel. If I went to the authorities and exposed the VIN swap, what would happen? They would investigate. They would discover that the car was not the Shelby it claimed to be. They would run the hidden chassis numbers on the frame, and they would trace it back to the wrecked '68 Mustang. And who was the legal owner of that car? Me. I would be implicated in the entire fraud. He had made me the legal owner of the crime's central piece of evidence. The logbook wasn't a smoking gun against him. It was a suicide note for me. It documented the illegal transformation of my property. His genius was in its sheer audacity. He knew I would eventually find the logbook. He'd probably left the shoebox on the shelf on purpose. Another piece of bait. He wanted me to discover the VIN swap. He wanted me to feel that surge of victory, that belief that I had finally cornered him. He had anticipated my every move, and now he had me trapped. If I exposed him, I exposed myself. I would be facing felony charges for vehicle fraud right alongside him, but if I did nothing, he would win. He would get away with the money, his girlfriend would have a beautiful, if illegal, car, and the courts would still hold me responsible for squandering the $150,000 marital asset, because on paper, that's what the car was. Checkmate. He'd well and truly put me in checkmate. Every path I could see led to my own destruction. I felt a wave of utter despair wash over me, so profound it was almost peaceful. I was beaten. He had won. I sat there on the cold concrete for what felt like hours, the title and the logbook feeling like lead weights in my hands. The silence of the garage was absolute. It was the silence of defeat. I thought about the life we had built, the 10 years of laughter and shared dreams, and realized it had all been a long con. I wasn't his wife. I was his mark. My phone buzzed again, dragging me back to the present. It was Mark. I stared at his name, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. What more could he possibly have to say? Curiosity, or perhaps a deep-seated masochism, made me answer. "Did you get to the end?" he asked, his voice calm and devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a surgeon discussing a successful operation. "You're a monster, Mark," I whispered, my own voice hoarse. "I'm a survivor," he corrected me, "and I always have a contingency plan. I knew you were smarter than I let on. I knew you might dig deep enough to find the VIN swap. This was my insurance policy, a little mutually assured destruction to keep things from getting messy." "So what now?" I asked, the words feeling hollow. "You've won. You have the money, the girl, the car. You've destroyed me. What more do you want?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. For the first time, I heard a flicker of something uncertain in his silence. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, almost conspiratorial. "That's the thing. There's a loose end. One I didn't plan for, that news story. It's bigger than I thought it would be. It's not just local anymore. It's been picked up by a national wire service. The car, our car, is becoming famous, and famous cars get looked at, closely, by people who know what they're looking for." My heart skipped a beat. A loose end. "The wrong expert sees that car at a show. The wrong collector gets a look under the hood," he continued, a new urgency in his tone. "And this whole thing unravels for both of us. The story you created, the one I used against you, it's become too powerful. It's a liability. We have a problem, you and I, and we need to fix it. I've just sent you an address. I'll see you there in an hour. Come alone." The phone clicked, dead. A second later, a text message arrived with a location pin. It was for a remote self-storage facility in an industrial park on the outskirts of town, a place where things go to disappear. He was right. The viral story was a double-edged sword. It had sealed my legal fate in the divorce, but it had also put a ticking clock on his fraud. And now, he needed my help to bury the evidence. My mind reeled. What was he planning? What was at that storage unit? Then, my eyes fell back on the shoebox, on the pile of original greasy parts from the real Shelby, the car's birth certificate. An idea began to form in my mind, a wild, desperate gamble. It was a long shot, a crazy shot, but it was the only shot I had left. He thought he had me in checkmate, but he had forgotten about one piece still on the board, the ghost, the real Eleanor. The drive to the storage facility was a blur. My hands were slick on the steering wheel, my mind a whirlwind of fear and fragile, audacious hope. Mark thought he was calling me to a meeting to clean up his mess, to intimidate me into silence. He thought he was still in control. What he didn't know was that I wasn't coming alone. Tucked away in a canvas bag on the passenger seat were the contents of the shoebox, the original carburetor, the distributor cap, the radio, all the greasy forgotten pieces of the real Eleanor. And in my pocket, I had the logbook and the 2 titles. I wasn't coming to negotiate my surrender. I was coming to claim my king. I pulled up to the address. It was a sprawling, anonymous complex of corrugated steel doors under the harsh glare of sodium lamps. Mark's rental car was parked near a unit at the far end of a deserted row. As I got out, he emerged from the shadows. He looked different, haggard, the smug confidence replaced by a tense, nervous energy. The viral story had spooked him, badly. "You came," he said, his eyes darting around the empty lot. "Good. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Mark," I said, my voice colder and steadier than I felt. "You've already said it all." "No, listen," he said, stepping closer. "The story, the car, it's too hot. My girl Amber, she's getting recognized. People are asking questions. We need the car to disappear. Permanently." He gestured to the storage unit behind him. "I've arranged for it to be shipped out of the country, new identity, gone forever, but the bill of sale, the transfer of title, it's all in your name. To Sarah, a person who doesn't exist. We need to create a new paper trail. You're going to sign a document stating that the buyer returned the car, and then you'll sign it over to a holding company. It cleans the slate for everyone." He was trying to make me an active, willing participant in the cover-up. He wanted my signature on a new set of lies that would bury the truth so deep it could never be found. He was offering me a way out of the legal jam he'd put me in, but the price was my silence, my complicity. "And what do I get out of it?" I asked, playing along. "Besides not going to jail for a crime you committed." "You get a clean break," he said, a hint of the old arrogance returning. "I'll even give you a cut from the final sale, 20 grand, enough to get back on your feet." $20,000, an insultingly small price for my soul. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You think this is about money, Mark? After everything?" His face hardened. "This is about survival. Now, are you going to sign the papers or not?" "I'm not signing anything," I said, my voice ringing with newfound clarity. "But I am here to make a deal." Before he could respond, the glare of headlights cut through the darkness. A heavy-duty flatbed tow truck rumbled down the row and pulled to a stop beside us, its diesel engine a low growl. The driver's side door opened and a man got out. He was older, with a stern face and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mark," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "I'd like you to meet Arthur Vance." Mark's face went white. Arthur Vance, the editor of Classic Collector magazine, the man whose reputation was built on exposing frauds just like him. "What is this?" Mark stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "What have you done?" "You said it yourself, Mark. The story went viral," I said, pulling the parts from my bag and placing them on the hood of his car. "And it reached some very interesting people. People who know that the distributor cap on a 67 GT500 has a very specific casting number. People who know what the original radio looks like. People who, when they heard the story of a legendary car being sold for $1, got very, very curious." Arthur Vance stepped forward, picking up the dusty carburetor and examining it with an expert eye. "This is the real deal," he said, his voice a low baritone. "The parts from the original car. And I assume this," he added, looking at the logbook I held out to him, "is the story of the fake one." Mark was cornered, a trapped animal. "You can't prove anything. It's her word against mine." "It's not just her word, son," Arthur said grimly. "It's your handwriting, and it's the car itself. You see, after I spoke with your wife, I made a few calls. I have a friend who is very good with public records. He found the address for the father of a Ms. Amber Pope, a nice man, retired plumber, very much alive. He was more than happy to let my photographer take a few detailed pictures of the gift his daughter had just received. The VIN plate on the firewall is a sloppy forgery. You can see the drill marks from the new rivets. It would take a state inspector about 5 seconds to spot it." Mark stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and pure hatred. You went behind my back." "You taught me how, Mark," I said softly. "You taught me to always have a contingency plan." My deal with Arthur was simple. I gave him the exclusive story, the whole true story. The affair, the stolen money, the fake dying girl, the VIN swap, the logbook. I gave him everything. In return, he made a single phone call to the state insurance commissioner's office, laying out the details of a massive fraud case with verifiable evidence and making it clear that I was the cooperating witness, not a co-conspirator. The final piece of my plan fell into place as a sleek, black sedan pulled up behind the tow truck. 2 men in suits got out. They weren't repo men. They were insurance fraud investigators. It was over. The look on Mark's face as they read him his rights was more satisfying than any financial settlement could ever be. It was the look of a mastermind whose intricate web had been utterly destroyed. Amber, they informed him, had been picked up an hour ago. She'd folded in 10 minutes, blaming everything on him. As they led Mark away, Arthur Vance turned to me. "You know," he said, gesturing to the flatbed, "the insurance company will take possession of the clone. It'll be held as evidence, then likely destroyed. But the original title, the VIN, the parts, the identity of the real Shelby GT500 still exists. It legally belongs to you." He pointed to the flatbed. Sitting on it, strapped down and covered in rust, was a barely recognizable automotive skeleton. It was the original shell of Eleanor, the true one. After our call, Arthur had tracked it down. Mark had sold it for scrap, but the yard owner had recognized what it was and had tucked it away, hoping to one day restore it himself. Arthur had bought it back. "It's not much to look at," he said, "but the soul is still there. It's a long road back, but she can be rebuilt, the right way this time." I looked at the rust bucket, the thing that had started all this, and I didn't see a wreck. I saw a beginning. I saw a project. Not for Mark, not for anyone else. For me. The legal battle was messy, but with my evidence and testimony, it was swift. The divorce court threw out the dissipation of assets claim, ruled Mark's actions as criminal fraud, and awarded me the entirety of the liquid assets he had tried to steal. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough for a down payment on a small house, a blue one, with a wraparound porch. Enough to start over. And enough to begin the slow, painstaking process of bringing the real Eleanor back from the dead. I sold the story rights to a magazine for a tidy sum, and the tale of the $1 Shelby became a legend in the car community for a whole new reason. Sometimes, late at night, I go out to my new garage. I turn on the light and look at the chassis of the car I am slowly, piece by piece, rebuilding. It's my masterpiece now. And as I polish a piece of original chrome, I can still smell a faint hint of old leather and lemon polish. But it's not Mark's smell anymore. It's mine. It's the smell of a legacy I reclaimed, a future I rebuilt, and a soul I bought back for a single hard-earned dollar.